I had a weird. This is the closest I think I've ever been to seeing. It was a UFO for like 3 days to me because it was in the sky. It was unidentified. But
Today on Tinfoil Friday, how big is Nick's dick really? Our guest today is Nick Dominy, a man who's been rumored to have the largest dick ever recorded.
mega dicks.
A
lot of people have micro penises. Not a lot of people have macro penises. You know what I'm saying? Megalithic.
Do you care to show the audience and to set the record straight?
If this is a normal dick, my dick is at least this big.
All right, it's a mystery.
Broken half.
It's my week again to do Tinfoil Friday. Welcome to MKUSUAL. It's like MK Ultra but more normal. I'm in host mode right now, Nick. I'm ready to go.
I'm excited for what you cooked up.
I'm excited too because I had like 3 topics. I thought this was your week a little bit, and then I didn't put together a lot of stuff on either. I just had like very small amounts, and so we kind of hit go time. You were working at the comedy club, and I was like, I had to put something together, and I started diving into this one thing, and it turned out way better than I expected. We're doing the Black Knight satellite.
Fuck yeah.
Which I know a lot of people know about. I'll give you the headline. The Black Knight satellite is a supposed 13,000-year-old alien satellite that's been orbiting around Earth. Let's see here.
I already have a lot of questions.
Yeah, there's a lot. So let's see here. Ooh,
There's a lot.
There was one thing that I forgot to add to the list, but we'll save it to the end. I'm gonna open up my research notes. Okay, so that's the story. That's the headline. Why do we think there's an alien satellite that's orbiting around Earth? Okay, we start, and I'm gonna be real honest about the debunkers and stuff this episode. Here's 2 things I found that were weird. Why is it called Black Knight? Literally nobody knows. We can't peg down the first time it was named that at all. That doesn't come from a document. It doesn't come from like a specific witness.
Okay.
Why 13,000 years? Nobody knows. The best we can
That was my first question.
The best we can come up with is that it's just the most common theory. 13,000 years ago was like the end of the Ice Age. It's when a lot of the Atlantis stuff and all that stuff would have been happening.
Younger Dryas era, kind of.
Although being into UFOs, I will say, a lot of times there's some weird little piece of information, like this thing happened this day, or this is this many years old, that is just a myth forever, and you always wonder, where did that come from? And then out of nowhere, it will be verified later. So like to me, the 13,000-year-old thing, it might just be part of the lore because a lot of stuff happened 13,000 years ago. It might also be like we have some evidence of this. But the legend begins in 1899 with Nikola Tesla, who while experimenting with wireless energy transmissions at his Colorado Springs laboratory, detected a mysterious signal. This is, I believe, also the signal that many people thought he detected from Mars.
Okay.
He just didn't have his advanced enough stuff to know where it was coming from. He knew it was coming from space, but he could not say with specificity it's Mars or it's a satellite or it's the moon. What we do know is it was not the Earth.
Okay.
Not back then.
Isaac Asimov would have been alive during this time, right? Because like War of the World. Wait.
I believe he would have, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
He recorded a signal as a regular, distinct transmission that he believed was not from Earth. He speculated it might originate from space. In his journals, he described the signal as unlike any known terrestrial interference, suggesting it could be a form of extraterrestrial communication. Later researchers connected Tesla's signal to the Black Knight satellite theory, proposing that the transmission he detected could have been an early indication of the extraterrestrial contact from space. And there's also, here's the thing. with the Black Knight satellite. I said in the beginning, we don't know where the name comes from. A lot of this story is like this. It's basically a theory that's been out there, and people just take hodgepodge pieces of information and kind of throw it in the theory. It's not like Roswell, where it's like one guy claimed one thing happened, and we have this newspaper article, and it happened on this date and time. It's definitely like a more of a scientific. The debunkers use this against the Black Knight theory, but I actually think it's a strength because there's a bunch of different strands of evidence for it.
And okay, so 1889 is that what this is?
1899.
99, and then that's like a long. It's 125 years
Yes.
to like of I don't know. Go on.
Yeah. So just that alone, you're like, okay, he's getting something from space. Some people said maybe it's pulsars. We've later discovered that there's like no way he could have been picking that up. Okay. He was getting a signal from space. We just don't know why or how or.
And it was probably, if it's in orbit, so it's probably on a regular. Like it would come around at the same time.
That's what makes his stuff so weird, is that it was regular.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he kind of just announced this to the world and then went on to working with like, Tesla was into so much shit.
Right.
That like he could just say a thing to a newspaper, like I just talked to aliens on the radio, and then he's just like, I don't have time for that. I'm working on my free energy.
Yeah.
The guy was just so all over the place and such a genius. But the mystery continues. And gets more specific, maintaining the radio wave thing. In the 1920s, radio operators began detecting what they call long-delayed echoes, where signals sent to distant locations would return much later than expected. These echoes were unusual because the delay could not be explained by the Earth's curvature or typical atmospheric conditions, leading many to consider them an anomaly. Now here's how weird these are. I don't know anything about radars or radios, but human beings do. And we're actually we might not know a lot, but radio is one of those things we're very, very good at.
Yes.
To the point where we're very good at radar detection. We're very good at like minimizing that with stealth stuff. Some people say we shoot down UFOs with radar stuff. We get radar stuff. Some people even speculate we have like mega radar weapons and stuff. Here's how weird this 1920 stuff was. One, it's actually never been explained. And here's essentially what was happening. We know mathematically how radio waves work. We know how the Earth's atmosphere works. People would be sending stuff. It would hit exactly like it should. And then like an hour later, you get it again.
Interesting.
And then like an hour later, you get it again. And you get these echoes of these things. Yeah.
Okay, was it like, did this, like an echo, like it gets softer? Were there any like distinguishing characteristics about it?
It's just a completely unexplained phenomenon where it'd be like if I sent you a text. I mean, this is a very rough analogy. It'd be like if I sent you a text and then an hour later you get the text again and you get the text again. And I'm not sending the text.
I got you. Okay.
Something essentially, and I'll explain what they think it is. But I tie this to the Nikola Tesla stuff because he said his stuff was repeating. Then we advance technology another 20-some years. We have better radio technology. We understand how it works. And we're getting this phenomenon where it's not just little pings and dots. It's like full-ass messages. I'm like, Nick, can you hear me? And you like, bing, bong, get it exactly when you should. 30 minutes later, bing, bong. For no reason, you get the same thing again. There's no reason that should happen. The delays could not be explained by the Earth's curvature or atmospheric condition. Normally, when a radio signal is sent, it would reflect off the Earth's surface or ionosphere and return almost immediately or after a brief delay. However, the LDEs would return after unusually long time, sometimes minutes or even hours. You shoot a radio wave, it's not going to take hours and hours to get anywhere.
Right.
After the original transmission, far longer than any known cause could explain. The return times, what was particularly striking about the LDEs was the regularity and repetition of their delays. Some signals would be reflected multiple times, producing a series of echoes at specific intervals, which was not characteristic of typical radio interference. Some theorists speculate this is connected to an object off Earth, such as the Black Knight satellite. And researchers later suggested that the LEDs could have been caused by a satellite, hypothesizing it was reflecting radio signals back to Earth, further fueling the mystery. And we're going to get more into this later. I'm doing this completely chronological.
I got you. Okay.
This is just a weird thing that was happening in the 20s. Of course, we had no satellites in the 20s. Okay.
The irregularity, that makes sense, because it might be on the other side of the Earth. They do the radio thing, but it takes or it's right there, bounces off a couple minutes later.
Well, the thing was the regularity.
Oh, regularity.
The regularity, because
I misheard
typically a radio wave should be like, not instant, but it's like we know how far it has to travel, it's bouncing off the ionosphere, it's coming back. The only thing that would explain an echo would be that it's getting interfered with in between, which we obviously had no satellites at the time, but the other things that could interfere with it, like weird weather patterns or a storm in the ionosphere, those things would not produce regular echoes.
Okay, I misheard you. So,
yeah.
Okay.
So it's actually the regularity that's very strange. Donald Keyhoe in the 50s. Donald Keyhoe, very famous, prominent UFO researcher. He was, I believe, a Navy pilot or a Marine. Oh, he's a Marine Corps major pilot. He stated outright to the newspapers that the U.S. military had tracked unidentified objects in Earth's orbit, which we believed were not of an earthly origin. He argued that they could be artificial satellites launched by extraterrestrials, which he saw as evidence of alien visitors. Here's some other weird shit that was going on in the 1950s. There was apparition reports. Around the same time as Donald Keyhoe, various sightings of unidentified objects in Earth's orbit were reported by both military personnel and amateur astronomers. These objects were sometimes described as unusual satellites or spacecraft, with some attributing their origins to extraterrestrials. In 1954, reports surfaced of strange objects seen orbiting the Earth, which should not have existed at that time. This is pre-Sputnik.
Yeah.
This was such a big phenomenon. I found this interesting. I just threw it in. This was such a big mystery that they got Clyde Tombaugh involved. If you've never heard of this guy, he's the guy who discovered Pluto.
Okay.
He was a prominent astronomer. He was highly skilled at tracking objects in space. He worked on this mystery. His background made him an important figure in discussions related to extraterrestrial objects and UFOs, including the Black Knight satellite. And while Tombaugh didn't directly support the Black Knight satellite theory, he did investigate unusual objects in Earth's orbit, including those reported in connection with UFO sightings. In interviews and statements, he acknowledged that there were objects in space that couldn't always be easily explained, and he was open to the idea that there might be a phenomena, particularly extraterrestrial, that further explained them. So that's the 50s.
That was
Whistleblower from the Marines comes out, says there are satellites. And there's kind of a pattern here you'll notice as we go on. And I built this episode in a series of patterns as well. Like, for instance, we'll get back to that as well. Somebody will notice something or say something with the current state of technology. There'll be some debunked reason or whatever. Oh, it's radio interference. But the government never stops looking into it.
okay.
And then with later technology, somebody else will admit, oh, hey, this is still a mystery. That stuff you said to debunk it ain't exactly true, or it doesn't exactly explain it. Here's some other weird shit. All right. So we have this. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, just like from the military perspective, they're like, it's a defense problem because like their thinking is probably going to be like, whose is it?
That's the thing with the 1950s stuff is.
So they would keep researching it until they figured it out because they're like, well, what if someone else has this technology that we can't even fathom? They're gonna, that's scary, and that's like their job is to defend us from shit like that. And if it's like, if it's our enemy, if it's the Germans, if it's whoever, then
that's kind of what happened. So in the 50s, they were kind of paranoid it was the Russians. We later found out they didn't have that type of shit.
Okay.
We're just seeing stuff. And I have even later, we'll get back to the satellite thing. We're kind of still in the mysterious satellite area of this.
Okay.
But we have even more recent evidence that there was something going on in the 50s. But as our technology improves, as we put more stuff into space, in the 60s, we discovered what is called polar orbiting satellites, or a polar orbiting satellite. And essentially the military, I'll just read this. In the early 1960s, scientists and military personnel working with radar and satellite tracking systems discovered an object orbiting Earth in an unusual polar orbit. Unlike most satellites, which orbit along the equatorial plane, because we got to use them, that's like the most rational place for us to put a satellite.
Yeah.
This object's orbit was nearly perpendicular to the Earth's equator, passing over the poles. This made it an oddity, as such orbits were rare for satellites at the time. The idea of a polar orbiting satellite has been kicked around, especially in the early 1960s. A polar orbit, so essentially instead of going this way, you're going this way, would essentially allow you to see the whole Earth.
That makes sense.
In a way that,
Because it would be rotating and it would go. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
It's going against, and we have tracked these things. There's some people who think this could be like a super duper secret. It would have to be the US almost. Satellite, it could be the Soviet Union, but the military was looking into it, which means it probably wasn't us.
Well, this was after Eisenhower did warn us of the military-industrial complex.
That is true.
So it could be, I mean, to me, that's like when Deep State went live, was like he was telling us something there. And I believe that those where there are factions within our government.
Yeah.
Some are operating, they're operating independently of each other, and sometimes probably without knowledge of, without full disclosure.
Right. And I do believe that. I do believe there are factions.
There's money that goes missing. Where does the money go? It doesn't all fit in people's pockets. It has to be used for something.
Yeah.
Like.
Right. It's almost like a weird internal civil war.
Yeah. Just different, different belief systems are going to work towards different ends, and they're like, well, we can't do it against them, so we're just going to do it in secret anyway.
Yeah, a lot of the CIA stuff's like that. They'll just be off doing something that's entirely against what the military would want, but they have to do it for their own purposes.
Or the political apparatus at the time, or whatever it is.
So we know there were polar orbiting satellites. This would have to be so highly advanced, though, for the time.
To do it deliberately.
Yes. And here's what makes it even weirder, and probably not of human origin, is that this thing was in what's called a retrograde polar orbit.
Okay. What's that mean?
So, a prograde orbit is when you travel in the same direction as the Earth's rotation. So even if you're going around the poles, you're still traveling with like its tilt and stuff. And the reason you would do that, for obvious reasons, especially if you have the most advanced satellite, saves fuel.
Yes.
Conserves energy. It uses Earth's gravity and tilt to its advantage. A retrograde orbit is just going completely against that. Retrograde orbit is something that moves in the opposite direction of Earth's rotation. To achieve this orbit, a rocket must expend significantly more energy to counteract Earth's rotational speed, making launch more fuel intensive and less efficient for it to orbit. The orbit is, however, considered ideal for monitoring the planet from a distance because it allows the satellite to cover the entire surface.
And this is saying that the Black Knight satellite is in a retrograde orbit?
That's the theory.
Okay.
Is that they were tracking it and they were super interested in it because it was one in a polar orbit and two in a retrograde orbit. It's just doing all the wrong things that you would want from a satellite to maintain efficiency and take pictures and stuff. It's doing the most mathematically efficient thing that a spy satellite would do, but also at the cost of like immense energy expenditure. And also you would have to, I was reading some other stuff that said that like, even to get this thing in orbit, it would take more resources and time because it's easier to fuck it up. because the thing has to be constantly like fixing itself and like fighting against gravity and shit. It's just like a big monumental task.
Okay.
And we do know the our military was monitoring it. So you're right, it could be factions. Again, this is just one piece of the evidence. So we got a guy in the 50s who says, hey, shit's up there. Then in the 60s, we know they're tracking something that's going in like a way we don't understand. Okay, next, back to the long delay echoes. We're moving to the 70s. People were still looking into this. What the fuck was going on in the 20s? In the 1970s, Scottish researcher Duncan Lunan studied the long delay echoes and proposed a groundbreaking theory about their origin. Lunan suggested the LDEs were not random, but were structured signals, possibly from an artificial source, and he connected them to the Black Knight satellite. He believed the long-delayed echoes pointed to a solar system near Epsilon Boötis, also known as Izar, located approximately 30 light years from Earth. He interpreted the pattern as the echoes of the echoes. He looked at like the, how long did it, as a coded message, which he claimed could indicate the position of an alien spacecraft or installation. Lunan proposed that the echoes were not random, but intentional signals being bounced back to Earth. According to the hypothesis, the echoes were a form of interstellar communication, and the delayed times were a means of encoding information. He suggested that an extraterrestrial civilization was using Earth's atmosphere to reflect these signals, potentially directing them to a specific location in space. His key insight was that the delayed times of the echoes were too precise to be caused by any natural phenomenon, and an alien civilization could be intentionally reflecting the radio waves back at Earth at calculated intervals, basically in an attempt to communicate. And he used this method of encoding it, pointing to the Epsilon Boötis as a target. And I'll get more into what that star system is in a minute and why this might be significant. But this would actually make a lot of sense. So essentially the theory is that the echoes were not really echoes. This thing was capturing them, picking them up, and then shooting them back down to where they're supposed to go. And doing it in time periods where you'd be like, hey, that's weird. And I guess he looked at these time periods, did some math. This is way above my pay grade, and the shit points to this one star system.
Okay. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Well, I mean, just like for him to do that, like that guy's a fucking genius, obviously.
Yeah.
This is kind of because like I couldn't even. I don't even know how to put that. I don't even know how to form that thought. Because, like, for one guy to do, that guy can do that, but then he has to be able to tell me how to understand that.
Yes.
Without having any, you know what I'm saying? So, like,
yes.
How can you can't just, like, go on TV and be like, look, here's what I've been doing.
There's a satellite no one knows exists.
And it's over there. And then
I've been trying to wrap my head around this for the last couple hours. The best I can come up with is that, and this is going to sound so caveman stupid, the best I can come up with is, okay, when you shoot a radio wave from point A, as I was explaining earlier, you kind of understand precisely how long it should take. Okay.
Right.
So if you have something capturing it, if you know where these radio waves are coming from and going to, and you have something capturing it in between, and then it's re-emitting them out at certain intervals, then you could theoretically go back, look at the record of the echoes, look at these time intervals, and essentially where, in reference to where it should have been bouncing off to begin with, like say it's supposed to just go bing bong, instead it goes bing bong, and then randomly you're getting ting, ting, ting.
it's almost like Morse code, like just short and long. They could encode Morse code with the interval.
But there might also be like directional stuff to it, because you could you could essentially put together with enough of the echo information where this thing would have to be. You know what I'm saying? To send it back, or to send it back at certain intervals, you could construct. If you say these are caused by a third-party object that's intercepting them, you could use triangulation to figure out where that thing is.
You have to start with that premise and then work backwards from. Okay.
Now I know this sounds wacky, this is crazy. Here's kind of the weird thing about this. I went a little into this like star system. Apparently, although people have just said, oh, he's not, whatever, that's crazy. Apparently, after he made these claims, this Epsilon Buddhist started getting a lot more attention from SETI.
Okay.
As a potential site for extraterrestrial life, largely because of the connection Lunin made between the LDEs and the star system. And his theory helped elevate Epsilon Buddhist as a candidate in discussion for where extraterrestrial signals might be directed. So somebody who was smart was taking it seriously. Carl Sagan, he was working with SETI. Yeah. Somebody who knows way more than us heard this theory, looked into it and said, fuck, we got to turn the satellites that way. We got to turn the radar antenna that way, start looking. And here's what they discovered largely after he made these claims. Epsilon Buddhist might be like a really good place for life to exist, apparently. It's about 30 light years away. It's a binary star system, which apparently the stuff we can observe about it makes it a candidate for hosting life-supporting planets. It has like a very big Goldilocks zone.
Okay.
And the idea that it could harbor extraterrestrial life comes from the fact that from what we can see with satellites and stuff, not satellites, but like radar stuff, it's stable and hospitable environment for planets. And its star system's age and characteristics suggest it might have been stable enough for life to develop on orbiting planets, similar to the way it has been on Earth, and quite some time ago, based on its age. So I just thought that was funny that he basically has this like wacky. He has a theory which sounds logical to me, and then like SETI actually started turning their radio telescopes that way, and then just so happened to discover something he could not have known. Right. Which is that, this looks like a really good candidate. And since the 70s, we've discovered a lot of like candidates for like Earth-like planets and stuff, and it seems to be happening like almost every month now. But like back then,
it was big news.
It's a big news. So it's kind of a very lucky, weird guess if he didn't have math to back it up. And the people in the know, Carl Sagan and the government who ran SETI, they liked it enough and then went on to discover that could be true.
Okay.
All right. So that one was one of the more convincing things to me. Here's another thing this has been going on since the 80s. There's another researcher named Dr. Margaret Kelvinson. She's an astrophysicist, I believe she's from UCLA. She works with the Harvard Historical Astronomy plates, which date back to the 1950s. These are essentially big glass plates where when they use astronomy stuff to look at the sky, they like mark these plates with all the stars and stuff.
Okay.
And they've saved these plates. Some of them. These plates were used to map star positions and other celestial objects. In her research, Kelvison and other scientists noticed that some stars and objects had disappeared or altered in ways that couldn't be explained. This led to speculation that the missing objects could be related to UFOs or extraterrestrial technology, possibly linked to the Black Knight satellite, or similar phenomenon. Her research focus is with these plates. The plates date back to the 50s. Her research started in the 70s and 80s. I believe she's still doing this. This plates document star positions and celestial objects observed over decades. Her key findings while conducting research on the plate, she and other researchers noticed stars and objects disappeared. And I've seen talks by her, actually.
Okay.
And she shows images of what the sky... I mean, we've been looking at the sky for just thousands of years. I mean, it's our horoscopes. We've named like every star you can see with the naked eye.
Used to have one of those little plastic things, and you could put where you are on the north or south hemisphere in the month, and it would show you in this little like kind of kaleidoscope thing.
Yeah.
What stars should be, what constellations should be visible. Like, oh, you can't see the Big Dipper at this time. You can. So you like look at it, and you're like, oh, there's you align with north and look up on the thing, that it would, yeah. So like, pretty cool, but analog device. That's kind of what this sounds like,
It's pretty analog, yeah.
which is crazy.
And if you ever see a talk, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, it's just a long way to say, like, people just had to keep this in their heads. But now,
Back in the day.
But now you punch an app and then you don't have to think about it. You just take what is being shown to you. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Side note, sidetrack, but like, it's got me thinking about a lot of things.
I've seen lectures by her for whatever reason, and she's very convincing, and she's accepted by the academic community. I don't know if they can come out and say, okay, these are UFOs or satellites, but a lot of shit has just disappeared since the 50s.
And she's probably, if she's like in those types of, if she's at that level in her field, she knows probably to use certain language.
Yeah.
That's not going to say it's an alien satellite. She's just going to say, she's going to have more scientific language that might mean just that, but we're not going to.
Pretty much. I mean, she's more or less speculated these could be foreign objects that have since we started watching with like radar and shit, have just like radio telescopes. It gets more frustrating though. And like I say, I've seen some convincing lectures from her, and she'll show these things. She'll show these plates and be like, there'll be like 3 or 4 things that were like pretty much orbiting in a similar, and then they're just like, they don't exist anymore. And like, so one of 2 things is happening. Either we were in early astronomy when we could finally actually record stuff photographically. Was way more stuff up there than there is now, and there's anomalous stuff. So one of 2 things is happening. One, it's theorized that like stars just disappear or blow up like way more often than we think, and it would have to happen amazingly fast, and this would have to be like a huge coincidence, because you're looking at stars as they were like millions of years ago,
Right.
And then in like this 10-year period, as we go from like putting stuff on plates to using like radio telescopes, like they just all go pop, 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 pop in ways that we don't fully understand, and in processes that should take thousands of years but take 5 years or a year. Or
this makes me think of like, maybe there's just like something in between it now. That would be like, like a Dyson, like the Dyson sphere.
Yeah.
Or like, I don't know. That's just like caveman brain talking, but like go on.
No, please.
Well, but that's it. Like maybe something we can't. I don't know. Cause I don't know enough.
That's what people have speculated. Dyson. They have speculated it could be technology from a far way away. There's everything from it's right up here in our atmosphere to it's some crazy shit happening way out there.
I guess my thought is like, if it's intelligent, it could be hiding. It could be occluding it. It picks up our radar.
Yes.
That's pinging off it. They're like, oh, humans are here now. We gotta watch ourselves, and I don't know.
Which they wouldn't have to do prior to the 50s.
Right. So
it's just like we turned on
the
a light
coincidence
switch.
thing got me thinking that way. So like,
we essentially as a species, like, and that's the other thing people say is like, one of the big debunking things about the Black Knight is that, you get your Neil deGrasse Tyson types, and they're like, well, if I was going to put a satellite around a developing civilization, I would have it way farther out, like around Jupiter, and it would watch us from there. It's like, but you got to remember, we just flipped this light switch on like 50, 60 years ago.
Yeah.
Like 70 years ago. Before that, we were just monkey people for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years. Like, maybe there's why would you want to hide from this, when we're just like walking around like beating stone tools, you know what I mean?
We were some people still do. We were just like yelling at the sun because it was scary, and like, it took our fucking rain away or something,
Right.
There's still people who are superstitious.
It's crazy to be like, well, if I
ways.
was an alien. That's stuff that pisses me off about like Sagans and like Neil deGrasse Tyson is like, they think they're smarter than aliens because they're like, the way I would do it. And it's like, well, what if they don't give a fuck? Like,
Right.
What if they don't give a fuck? Because what if once you start capturing in a certain way, they change, which is evidence on this plate. They might be like, we don't give a fuck if you get us once, because we're just going to fucking
Right.
change the whole thing up because we're way smarter than you.
Right.
Here's another weird thing about the plates. A lot of them have been destroyed or discarded starting in the
Discarded.
60s and 70s. Yes. Intentionally by Harvard, which I've heard her talk about, and they don't offer very good explanations. They're basically the explanation is we have better technology now, so we don't need these anymore.
That's a fucking relic. That's like a historical artifact.
Which, when you study, shows anomalies.
Yes. This is like we were talking about this yesterday. The Smithsonian disappearing shit. Like,
Yeah.
why?
Your whole job is to do the opposite of that.
Literally, just why? That like.
Yes. It's at worst, okay, at best, it's the scientific orthodoxy. They get a new toy, they get a radio telescope, they get a computer to keep the data, and they say, in with the old, out with the new. Or in with the new, out with the old, or whatever.
Yeah.
At best, that's it, which is also hubris because you build in so many scientific assumptions, including that stuff won't be that different from the 50s to the 60s because stuff takes a long time to happen. Well, apparently it doesn't. Which is what she's discovering.
It's not, even if it's not proof of
the Black Knight.
Even if it's not proof of the Black Knight, it does prove the hubris. It proves that you were wrong.
Yeah, you have records of stuff that could be super useful to study, and you were so sure that you already understood it that you literally destroyed your own records for no reason. Right. Harvard has never faced budget problems. There's no reason why they would do this. The nefarious reason would be that they got the radio shit. They started noticing shit be weird.
Yep.
And they said, we got to get rid of some of these old...
Which type of human behavior is more likely?
It's either ignorance or evil. Hubris.
Okay. Not more likely. That's the wrong one. That's the wrong...
Well, at best, it's a tragedy.
Yeah.
And I think like a majority of these might have been destroyed.
Okay.
In favor of digital data.
Anyway.
Yeah. And they kept here's the other weird thing. They kept destroying them through the 60s and 70s.
Oh, okay. And then when did she start her research?
She started hers in the 70s and 80s.
Okay.
And I believe it still continues.
Okay. Anyway.
So onward. So far the best pieces of evidence for me are like, and I'm just gonna say it right now, my theory is that Black Knight satellite is kind of a psyop. We don't know where the name comes from. It's immediately associated with all this like woo-woo Atlantis 13,000 years ago shit. My theory is that there's more than one. There's probably a lot of black light,
Yeah.
That this is what the government does. They put a name on it that's like this goofy name, and they say, oh, and it's 13,000 years old for no reason, and they inject this into the literature and the study so that everyone's looking for the one thing.
Yes.
When evidence is that there, and all logic would tell you that there'd probably be multiple instruments, doing multiple different things if you were like an alien civilization. And
or a highly advanced human civilization, we would obviously not rely on one thing. We would have redundancy or like a diverse strategy to do whatever.
Yeah, let's just say this is the underwater people. Like,
yeah,
they, yeah. So anyway, I believe there's probably more than one of these things, as evidenced by her findings, and also just the fact that this echo thing was like recreatable and that this guy could go back so many years later and use the math, and SETI took that seriously. I think it's more than likely that the black star is a misnomer, or it's like a red herring. It's like, try to find this one thing.
Yeah. Back to the echoes, because it's like, my question is, were they studying it? Were they recreating the phenomenon? Like, we're going to broadcast at noon on Tuesday and just wait and count? Or was it there's just always radio transmissions and they were observing it? Does that make sense?
I believe it started as the latter.
Were they able to...
No.
To like, on Tuesday, we're going to get this 2-hour delay?
I really don't believe so.
Okay. So it was like they're just observing a phenomenon. They're not able to like...
They're observing and recording when the echoes happen.
Okay.
Which also makes sense because you couldn't... That also adds to the extraterrestrial thing because if you can't repeat it, that means something else is in control.
Yet the phenomenon persists.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're like, well, that's crazy because it happened at noon. And the other thing is, if they were doing that type of study and they were able to repeat it, then they would have an explanation for it.
Yeah, okay. That's what I'm trying to...
Yeah. And we're basically at the end here. The evidence so far is just like essentially radio waves and these weird plates we found that have pictures of them. There is, however, a couple pictures and video. I could not find the video, oddly enough. I know it's out there. It's got to be on NASA or something, but I could not find it. There's a picture. There's maybe pictures and videos of this thing.
I feel like I've seen video of it.
You probably have. You're gonna recognize these pictures.
Yeah, I know what I've seen the pictures for sure. This came up like years ago, and then it kind of just never. I never went and looked for it or tried to do this and figure it out. Like, so, thank you for.
Oh, no problem. I know this is my Christmas present to you.
Okay, that's a great gift.
I'm just kidding. I want to 1 second while we're talking. If I can't immediately find this article I forgot to include in here, then it's just going to have to be an addendum for later. Let's see here. Okay, the STS-88 encounter. This was a 1998 space shuttle mission to the International Space Station. It was, in fact, the first time that the space shuttle docked with the International Space Station. Okay. While up there doing repairs on the space station, the astronauts noticed a strange object. I will go ahead and put these pictures up side by side while Nick's taking a look at them. So just still frames. That's one angle. That's two angles.
Do you know where these were taken from?
These were taken from the the space station and shuttle were launched. I don't know where they were located. It was one object at that point.
Okay,
but they were up there. This is taken from the space station / shuttle. Okay, NASA says that these things are, I believe, solar insulators. They believe it's a solar insulator that like popped off of the shuttle or the space station.
Oh, they're giving us a fucking weather balloon explanation.
They are, dude.
This looks like it's emitting light, or
both of them look like they're emitting light,
like in a pattern that's not like you can see the atmosphere is like, what is that word? Striated or
yeah. Striated.
But then this is going completely perpendicular, like emitting towards Earth.
Right. It also kind of just like looks like the shape, like in the second one, it looks like a shape that would be like a craft that would maneuver a little bit.
Yeah.
To me, it's definitely symmetrical. It has rounded edges. It's definitely a like intelligently made object because the solar, like the whole thing that this was part of the space station, that came a little later. Also, you would think that the astronauts taking the photos and the video and watching it would have realized, hey, I just lost this fucking... you're in space. You lose a thing that protects you from the sun. You're probably...
Should we go get that?
Yeah. You're probably like, hey... You think you would notice that. But apparently the astronauts didn't notice that. NASA just came up with this later. Here's some arguments as to why... these objects probably weren't what NASA says they are. Apparently they were moving independently.
Okay.
During the video capture, the object appeared to move in a way that was not typical of space debris. Space debris usually follows a predictable orbit and doesn't exhibit noticeable maneuvers unless influenced by an external force such as gravity or atmospheric drag. However, in this case, The object, the Black Knight satellite, appeared to adjust its position relative to the shuttle, suggesting it was actively controlling its motion or was being influenced by something other than the forces acting. NASA's basically saying this is a big advanced couch cushion that fucking went. That shit should just be gone.
It would just
like you throw a can outside your car, it's gonna do like you could track what's gonna happen with it.
Yeah,
it's the same in space.
What's that movie with Sandra Bullock and
Gravity?
Is that what it's called? Mm-hmm. Well, like they do a good job of like visualizing what happened. The shit just travels. Like once something breaks, it doesn't like.
No, it's gravity. It just follows a trajectory.
Would
same
go
as on Earth. Yeah,
this direction or that direction based on the trajectory of some. If it, whatever, yes.
So the astronauts were very interested in this because it appeared to be doing movements that were just out of fucking nowhere. Also, here's the headline: it was tracking the shuttle. The object seemed to maintain a consistent position relative to the shuttle, which some observers noted was not consistent with random debris, which would typically drift away or follow an erratic path. It appeared to match the shuttle's motion, leading some to speculate it was not merely debris, but something with purpose, such as an artificial satellite. This shit is not a solar blocker. Whatever this was, maybe it's a top secret Russian thing. Whatever this was, it's not an asteroid or a meteor.
Were the Russians involved with the International Space Station in the beginning?
Well, 98. I think they would have. They had Mir back in the 80s. I think they were involved. I think that's what made it international, is they've been involved the whole time.
Okay.
This is something artificial that is not acting like something you lost out the fucking window of the shuttle, which should just like go away. It's like moving around and following you, and this is all this is all on video. It's all attested to by NASA astronauts who have no reason to risk their careers. And so there it is. That's our big reveal, is our pictures of the Black Knight, or one of the Black Knights. Again, you can essentially write all of this off. A lot of it off is like advanced human stuff. And more than that, you could just say, look, there's a lot of stuff we don't understand. It doesn't necessarily mean aliens. That's why I love the approach of like the people who study this, of picking out all these different things that point to the conclusion, because it's like, well, here's a lot of different pieces of evidence,
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the story of a lot of smart people, from Tesla to like modern researchers to astronauts, who have all said, what the fuck is that? What's going on?
Wow.
To Epsilon Buddhist we go.
It's like
and I have more information this old ahead if you have this is just my notes or my stuff I captured. Like, if you have any questions, I did try to read a little more into some of these things. I didn't use every single thing I read. Like,
the part about the satellite. A satellite could just mean like an asteroid or a meteor that's caught in an orbit.
Yes.
Correct. It's just, but it's also used to point towards technology. So the satellite the retrograde orbit object
would be highly unusual. I asked ChatGPT that. That would be it almost has to be man-made.
So that makes sense. Because the space station orbits on the equator, or with like in a traditional orbit. So for it to like, I'm assuming the Black Knight is the thing that's in the retrograde orbit.
That's just one of the observations people found that points to there's something not us. We just don't do that because it costs so much money, and it really actually kind of makes no sense to do. It doesn't even really protect you from like, it obviously doesn't protect you from like detection.
Yeah.
It would just, the only reason to do it, to go full retrograde, would be because you fucking can and you just want to stay out of the way of other stuff.
I didn't bring, so like I had a weird, this is the closest I think I've ever been to seeing. It was a UFO for like 3 days to me because it was in the sky. It was unidentified. But the explanation. Will you look the Chinese space station?
Oh,
Will you
okay.
look up the orbit of the Chinese space station? Because this is okay. I was looking. I was outside smoking a cigarette. I was looking north. Like pretty. It looked low in the sky. It was like just above the tree line. There was a bright light, no trail, and it was moving because I had the trees and like power lines in front of me for reference. So I could see it like getting closer to the top of the power line. But it didn't appear bigger or smaller. And I had 3 people smoking a cigarette. I was looking north and we were all kind of like standing on the north, south, east, west. So
Yeah.
I was on the south looking north. I had someone looking at me who this thing was behind, and then 2 people. I was like, hey, will you please look at this thing? And they're like just kind of ignored. And I was like, please just like look and tell me you see this thing.
Yeah.
I've been a
When year?
fucking-
What year is this?
this would have been, I'd have to think about it.
Let me ask you this: before or after 2020?
Before.
Okay. I'll tell you right now, it's not the Chinese one because that one's only been up for 3.5 years, 3 years, 8 months.
Okay, well, the story I got, maybe I'm because I wrote it down. I keep a journal. Maybe I'm misremembering the Chinese part, but okay, all the people they looked pretty much didn't acknowledge it, and then we just kind of smoked a cigarette and went back in the
That's
bar.
such a UFO thing.
I'm
Is
like,
that everyone's like programmed to be like, weird.
and I was like, you guys saw that, right? And they're like, they looked, and they might not have actually.
Was
looked
it
and
okay?
seen
Was it moving?
It looked like it was going down.
That could have been the ISS. You can on a clear night see the ISS. I've seen it,
But it
before.
looked like it was going, like, so it was me, and then here's some power lines, and it's over here.
Yeah.
And it looked like it was going like this. It looked like it was going down.
Okay.
It was getting closer to the tree line and the power lines.
Very fast or pretty
No,
controlled?
pretty slow.
Okay.
But controlled, and it wasn't a star, because those would have been going like
Yeah.
across the sky in this direction, and this was going.
You can also see satellites. I've had my dad take me out and show me satellites.
So it didn't have a blinking light. It was a solid white light. It was a very.
That's what it would appear like.
Okay.
It would appear like a star. If you see the ISS or a satellite, it will essentially look like a star that's moving way too fast, but slower than like a meteor.
Because
It will be like on an elliptical. You'll kind of just see it go.
So
You could have seen a satellite or
I told this to a guy I knew. Maybe that's all it was.
could have been this one. Could have been the Dark Knight.
And the guy I told it to, he was like, he was a journalist in the Gulf War, and it's just like this dude that always hung out at the record store and the fucking bar I'd go to. He would always wear like Desert Storm era fatigues,
Yeah.
and like surplus gear. He was always just kind of smoking cigarettes and weird and interesting to talk to. I told him, I was like, hey, I had this thing, like, we had talked about like weird stuff, but not, anyway. He said his dad worked on the SR-71 Blackbird program.
Okay.
He was a radar operator in that program, so they'd have radar stations, and like he would monitor flights. So it would go from like Denver to Mexico City in like 6 minutes, and he told me all these details, which I looked up, and like it was true. He told me where he was stationed, that they had a radar base there. So this was like 50s and 60s when his dad was doing this. Anyway, he told me that, and then he's like, oh, it was, and I could be getting this wrong now that you've said it wasn't the Chinese space station, but I'm pretty sure he told me it was the Chinese space station. And it would definitely have been before 2020, like
I mean,
2012 to 2016. Like, do the Russians have their own space station?
I thought Russia had Mir, but I don't know if it's something we'll have to look into. Russia and China work together to create the ILRS.
And now I'm like doubting, like maybe I'm misremembering.
Maybe they
this.
have a thing up there that's an open secret.
Well, he was talking about like that it was on an orbit that was opposite of the space station, the ISS. That's why it like stuck out.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. No, they have other stuff. I was just reading about something else.
Okay.
2015, China did have a station called
That would be
Tianyu
about right.
Yuan
Okay.
until operation was lost in March 2016. It re-entered Earth's atmosphere in 2018. Yeah, you could. Yeah, that could totally.
Maybe
be
I
it.
saw it re-entering Earth's atmosphere.
That's crazy. That's like kind of a little gift. Launch year 2011. Okay, well, my bad. I looked up the wrong thing.
Okay.
Should have been more inquisitive. Yeah, you probably saw that. If that guy said that.
But it doesn't. It doesn't say it was in what's that called? North-south orbit.
The retrograde.
Well, it wasn't. It wouldn't have been. It was just he was implying
polar orbit?
that it was a polar orbit. He was implying that whatever I saw was on a polar orbit, and that he followed this stuff. He was the guy who told me about like the flight tracker apps. That's where I got into that.
Typically, weather observation satellites. I actually did read this earlier. NOAA's Joint Polar Satellite System. And it's on a polar orbit. It's also very good for weather stuff to be. I mean, yeah, we'd have to sit here and research this,
Okay,
but everything you're saying is plausible.
I'm gonna look it up because I definitely journaled about it. So I got anyway.
Okay, excellent.
Well, that was just a weird little anecdote.
No, that's cool. You might have seen.
I thought I was schizophrenic for 3 days, and then this guy who was schizophrenic told me that I had verifiable evidence. He's like, no, it's a Chinese weather satellite.
I mean, we could
space
definitely
station."
sit here and track it down. It might not be the most entertaining, but like I'm inclined to believe he knows something.
I trusted him because he always like, was honest with me, and then like gave me other verifiable information about his dad working on. At the time, it was top secret, but like when we talked, it was like, 2015 to 2018. So he's like, I can, it's not a secret anymore. But
Well.
I kind of miss Manhattan for that reason because there was a military base and then a college. And it was like an ag military school. So a lot of the stuff, it was also like a heavy research. They get tons of funding from the government and corporations to research like ag related stuff, which you would be researching the weather a lot to predict patterns or potentially control the weather to ensure you have food every year.
Yeah, I didn't mean to ever imply that we don't do polar orbits.
No,
or even that we don't do retrograde. It's just that was like the early '60s.
Yeah, no, I didn't take it that way.
I feel like you've had a couple encounters with stuff.
That one was definitely the weirdest part. Was the fucking reaction of the people around me.
Yeah,
that was so mind blowing.
We might have to have like a personal experience episode someday. I had a similar experience in high school where we took a very long trip for like debater forensics, and we were all in the van, and it was like the middle of the night. I mean, it was like we were coming back from like Western Kansas or something, and like there was just this very strange, large, almost like when you see like Halley's Comet or something, like hanging in the sky. And I remember being like, what the fuck is that? And my teacher was just like, oh, weird. People apparently just act that way. I don't know.
That's like such NPC energy.
Yeah.
And like, it's so disorienting.
Yeah, it makes me question, like, what am I, because if I'm looking at something, I'm like, what is that? And then you're just like,
it wasn't,
and you look at it and it's like clearly like headlights to you or something, you'd be like, oh, there's a road over there. You wouldn't say like weird and then just go right back. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Well, that's our conspiracy day. You stuck with us an hour.
Whoa. Tinfoil Friday.
Tinfoil Friday. Tomorrow we got stand-up Saturday, our most popular day of the week. I cannot explain it. We might have to.
People love
These formats aren't set in stone. We've talked about doing different stuff or having like a 2-week wide thing where like one Friday it's this, another Friday it's that. So I appreciate now that we've done enough episodes that we have like data on what people kind of seem to like or tune back in for.
People just love watching suffering.
Yeah,
They love watching people engage in a humiliation ritual.
That's why we wear these hats, trying to get views. Like and subscribe. My shouting about this last week is freaking working. We're up 20%.
Subscribers?
Yes.
Dude.
We have another one today.
Like and subscribe!
Subscribe to our fucking podcast. We're going to keep working for you. If nothing else, you can tell by how fast we put these out and by today's episode that we work for you. We're working for you. We're getting up on stage for you. We're doing research. We try to make it different every day.
I'm scaring my dog right now.
I'm working on myself to be a better person. Like and subscribe. We love you.
Watch the new Squid Games. It's good. Also, we love you.